Hi, I'm Chad with Move for Guitar. This lesson is from our series Music Theory for Guitar. In this lesson, I'm going to show you popular chord progressions using the new chords that we've covered in this section. First off, if you like the diagrams for everything in this series, including the diagrams for this lesson, you can download our free e-guide, Music Theory for Guitar. And this e-guide will be something that you can study and use as a reference for years to come. And like I said, it's free, so there's no reason not to just go download it. This is part 4.14 from our series Music Theory for Guitar. If you'd like to go back and start at the beginning, you can click the link on the screen. So in the previous sections, we covered chord progressions, and we covered them with triads and seventh chords. And in this lesson, I want to show you options with the new chords that we used or that we went over in this section. And I already mentioned it before, kind of went over it a little bit, but there's some things that I want to cover a little more in depth. And before I mentioned that obviously these are your chords, the 1 chord, 2 chord, 3 chord, 4 chord, 5 chord, 6 chord, and 7 chord. In each column are the popular chords or the most common chords to use in each of those locations. So for the 1 chord you have major, major 6, major 7, and so on. 2 chord, minor, minor 6, and so on. And that means that if you were making chord progressions, if you were going to play a 1 chord, you could choose from any of these. If your next chord was a 2 chord, you could choose from any of these. If your next chord was a 4 chord, you could choose from any of these, and so on. So you're not just stuck with the triads or the seventh chords. But you have to be really careful and really use your ear, because not all of these chord types or specific voicings are going to go with each other. So it's really important that you use something called good voice leading that I'm going to cover, and that's going to make a difference on the chords sounding good together. But also putting these chords in different orders isn't always going to sound right, even if you use good voice leading. Some chord types just aren't going to sound good in a certain order together. So you really have to use your ear to see what works well. So if we do this in the key of C again, obviously the chords for the key of C are C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, B diminished. We know that already. And if we were going to take one of the most popular chord progressions of 1, 4, 5, obviously with triads that would be a C major, F major, G major. You already know that. But if we wanted to use some of the chords from this chart, if we wanted to look at the 1, 4, 5 and choose from these chord types now instead of just the triad or just the seventh chords, we can come up with really interesting sounds more than what just seventh chords or triads would give us. So 1, 4, 5 chords that would sound more interesting than just the common triads or the seventh chords, we could do something like a C major 7 for the 1, an F major 7 sharp 11 for the 4, and a G 11 for the 5. So if we look back at this chart, the 1, we've chosen this major 7, which that one's an obvious one since we've covered seventh chords in depth. For the 4, we chose the major 7 sharp 11, which is a very specific sound to the 4 chord like I mentioned before. And for the 5, instead of just a triad or the regular dominant 7, we chose a dominant 11. Now, if you were to just to play random voicings of these chords, you might have a trouble really coming up with something that sounds good, because different voicings of these chords together aren't going to really sound that good or that strong. But there are voicings that you can make sound really good by using good voice leading. So I've come up with one on my own just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about voice leading. So for the C major 7, we could use this voicing, which if we're going from low to high with the notes would be root, third, then seventh, then another root and a third. So this voicing doesn't have the fifth in it. And from there we could go to this F major 7 sharp 11, which lowest to highest voicing would be the third, the seventh, the sharp 11, the fifth, and the seventh again. And this voicing doesn't have the root in it. And then from there we can go to the G13. I said G11 and I had that on the other screen, but a G13 would work just the same. So we're going to use a G13 instead of a G11 because that's what I wrote right here. So from there you can have this voicing, which from lowest to highest would be root, flat 7, third, 11th, and 13th. And this voicing is leaving out the 5th and the 9th. So technically it's not a full G13, but like I've talked about multiple times, you don't have to get that technical when you're calling out chords. We're using this as a G13. So the reason this would sound good is because it has what's called good voice leading. And the first thing it has are the notes on the first string, second string, and third string aren't moving. So you would hold these notes the whole time. And for the one chord, that would be the seventh, the root, and the third. For the four chord, that would be the sharp 11, 5, and 7. And for the five chord, that would be the 3, 11, and 13. But we're still fretting those same notes the whole time. So that's one thing that sounds strong between all these chords, is that they have those shared notes for each voicing. And then when we go from this one chord, the C major 7, to the 4 chord, the F major 7 sharp 11, we're actually leaving this third here as well, which it's going to become a different interval for the F major 7 sharp 11. It actually becomes a major 7th. And then we're just removing this root and letting the open string ring out. So this root is doing all the movement, and it's just moving down to that open string, which is a step and a half away. So that has strong voice movement because between those two chords, all these notes are staying. They just become different intervals for the new chord, and we've just moved the root of the one chord down to the open string to become the third of the 4 chord. So that has nice voice movement. And then to go to the next chord, these obviously stay the same because they stay the same for each one. And then we moved this one note up half a step and then added in the low root of this chord. And that has a strong voice movement as well. And this progression would sound really good if you arpeggiated it, meaning you pick the notes singly instead of just strumming away. It wouldn't be as strong of a sound, or maybe as good of a sound, if you just strummed it. But if you pick the notes individually, you could come up with a really cool sound using those voicings. So that gives you an idea of using good voice leading instead of playing different voicings that jump you all over the fretboard and all the intervals are having huge leaps. You're keeping things close together. You kept it close to open position. It is an open position for the most part. And you shared some notes, although for good voice leading you don't have to share notes all the time. And a lot of the movement was just smaller movements for the intervals that were moving. Or we could do it with simpler chords. So if we took the chord progression C, A minor, D minor, and G, which is a 1, 6, 2, 5, another really popular chord progression, we could do something like a C add 9, A minor 7 sus 4, D sus 4, and G, which if we look back at this chart, we had a C add 9 for the 1, an A minor 7 or just an A7 sus 4 for the 6, a D sus 4 for the 2, and then just a regular G for the 5, just a regular major triad. And this has good voice movement. If we just even use simple open chords, we could come up with good voice movement where we go from C add 9 right here to A minor 7 sus 4 or just A7 sus 4, D sus 4, and G. With this, these two notes are staying the whole time. We can just keep those fretted the whole time between all the chords. And then you're just moving these voicings and they're not moving very far, so it has good movement. So even with really simple chord progressions like this, these are really simple open chords that beginners can play. You can come up with more interesting sounding progressions just by using different chord types in each of those locations. In this case, the 1 chord, the 6 chord, the 2 chord, and the 5 chord, instead of just playing regular triads or 7th chords. Or another example, if we're still in the key of C but had a 5, 1, 4, 1, which would be G, C, F, G. If we went G, C add 9, F, 6 add 9, C add 9, we could do that with all simple open chords as well. And this one again leaves those two notes the whole time. And we could go from the G major, we would just move these two notes down towards the floor string each to come to the C add 9. Then we would do it again to get to the F6 add 9. And then we go back to the C add 9 and then back to the G major. So we're just moving these two notes down towards the floor and then back up, and that has a really strong sound, really good voice movement. And again, these two notes are staying the whole time. So good voice leading is something you can do with really simple chords, as far as simple chords to play in open position. but you can still play more interesting chord types instead of just regular triads or seventh chords. And this is just an idea of what you can do. This is a really deep subject, and the best thing to do is just take the chart that has all these chords listed out in each of their locations and just try out different combinations. So you can take a popular chord progression like a 1, 6, 2, 5 and just try out different combinations to see what sounds good together and see if you can find good voice movement. And I'm going to have other lessons in another eGuide that'll show more advanced chords that you'll have tons of options to choose from. So if you don't know a ton of chords, I'll have that coming out where you can actually pick and choose and put ones together to see if they sound good together. But even try with chords that you know, or go to my beginner chords section, learn a bunch of beginner chords. I give a bunch of different chord types even with open beginner chords, and you can try this out as well. And you'll come up with really unique, interesting sounds even with just common chord progressions as far as like a 1, 4, 5 or anything. You can just try out different chord types and come up with really hip sounds. So that's how to use the chords that we went over in this section in chord progressions. Like I said, just try it out with a bunch of different chord progressions and a bunch of different chord types and combinations. And go ahead and move on to the next lesson where I'm going to talk about something called slash chords. And be sure to download this eGuide. All of these charts are in there. And be sure to subscribe because we add at least one new lesson every day.